At 0958 hours, the sound of Nathan Cole's breathing was the only thing that existed inside his helmet. The world outside had already dissolved into coordinates, velocity vectors, and encrypted data streams. His pulse was steady, too steady for what he was about to do. On the deck of the USS Warden, 15 minutes earlier, the order had been given with the precision of a surgical incision: intercept and neutralize a high-speed narcotics vessel racing north across the Caribbean. No hesitation, no negotiation, just mathematics, metal, and the will of a pilot who had never missed. Every mission began the same way: cold, procedural, almost sterile. But this one felt different. The intelligence feed described a target so fast and unpredictable that it had slipped past 3 previous surveillance grids. The smugglers were confident, almost taunting, convinced they could outrun the sky itself. Nathan knew better. He wasn't chasing a boat. He was closing in on a signal of defiance that had challenged his country's reach. At this altitude, personal opinions were irrelevant. Only performance mattered. He had run the checklist 3 times. Weapon systems armed. Laser code verified. Fuel load optimal for a 2-hour window. The AH-1Z Viper wasn't built for comfort. It was built to end things cleanly. In the reflection of his visor, he could see the numbers aligning like a silent countdown to inevitability. Every decision from this point forward would happen faster than a heartbeat. That was the nature of precision warfare. There was no pause, no drama, just execution. The communication line cracked to life in his headset. The control tower's voice was distant, almost casual, as if authorizing a grocery delivery rather than an airstrike. But for Nathan, those words carried the gravity of command and the quiet weight of trust. Once airborne, there would be no second opinions. The system would obey his hand, the missile would obey the system, and physics would do the rest. That chain of certainty was both terrifying and comforting, a perfect design in which emotion had no seat. He remembered the first time he had seen a missile launch during training, a blinding streak that vanished into the horizon before anyone could blink. There had been no explosion in sight, just a ripple of realization that somewhere, something ceased to exist. Years later, the sensation was the same. Behind all the sensors and computer-guided optics, there remained one simple truth: every launch began with a human decision. And that human was him. Nathan tightened the harness across his chest, checking the data link from the Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft above. The feed showed the target's path cutting through international waters at 45 knots. 2 engines out of sync, a mechanical flaw that made the vessel traceable like a heartbeat on radar. He acknowledged the coordinates, entered them into his fire control display, and felt the vibration of the rotors syncing with his pulse. In that synchronization lay a strange serenity, machine and man moving as one. Not through instinct, but through training refined to reflex. He thought of nothing else. Not the ocean below, not the people on that boat, not the politics behind the mission. The cockpit was a sealed universe where morality was replaced by math. Each figure on the display translated into time, distance, and probability. Each command he issued transformed energy into trajectory. There was no room for hesitation, only alignment. He knew that once the data reached critical confirmation, the moment would come when steel would speak louder than words. The onboard systems blinked green across the board. Gyroscopes calibrated, targeting software verified, TSS ready. Nathan's thumb hovered over the safety switch that separated preparation from action. In the silence before acceleration, he could feel the heartbeat of the aircraft sync with his own steady, unflinching discipline. Out there, beyond the horizon, a vessel believed it was invisible. In here, invisibility was just a myth waiting to be disproven. When the timer reached 0, Nathan exhaled once, slow and deliberate. The engines roared to full output, and the helicopter surged forward into mission speed. The data feed pulsed brighter, the target lock confirmed, and the sky itself seemed to compress around his purpose. Somewhere out there, the clock was ticking for a group of men who didn't yet know their fate had already been calculated to the millisecond. The operation had begun. At 20,000 feet above the Caribbean, Ava Ramirez was the eye that never blinked. While the rest of the world slept beneath the haze of clouds, she was awake inside a metal sky, chasing the pulse of a ghost across open water. The radar feed glowed against her visor like a heartbeat on a monitor, steady, defiant, alive. Somewhere below, a smuggler's boat carved its path through the ocean, believing it was invisible. It wasn't. It was already inside her crosshairs, a moving signature in a sea of noise. Her hands hovered over the controls with the calm precision of someone who knew that a single keystroke could shift the balance of an entire mission. To the untrained eye, what she saw was chaos. Dozens of echoes, reflections, interference. But to Ava, every flicker had meaning. Every glitch was a whisper of intent. The Poseidon sensors, worth more than a city block, fed her everything. Wind velocity, engine tone, infrared differentials, acoustic profiles. She didn't see the ocean. She saw mathematics and movement, a rhythm of pursuit written in code. The order had come in short and clear. Confirm target, mark coordinates, relay to strike unit Viper 2-1. Nothing more, nothing less. The precision of that instruction was its beauty. There was no room for questions, no space for hesitation. In her world, hesitation could cost minutes, and minutes could erase opportunities forever. Her duty was clarity, the kind of clarity that left no trace of emotion behind. Yet beneath the steel of discipline, Ava knew the truth, that every operator carried like a shadow. Every data point was a heartbeat. Every target on her screen belonged to someone whose day would not end the way it began. She didn't let that thought linger. It was a distraction she couldn't afford. Duty didn't allow room for empathy, it only demanded excellence. The Poseidon's main console pulsed with new input. A sonobuoy array deployed earlier had detected the thrum of twin engines running slightly out of sync, an acoustic signature of a specific contraband model used by Venezuelan cartels. The anomaly was small, but unmistakable. The data aligned perfectly with satellite imagery from 10 minutes earlier. It was enough. Ava keyed the transmission sequence and sent the encrypted coordinates to Nathan's Viper. The information would arrive in his cockpit within seconds, painting a target he could destroy without ever seeing it with his own eyes. She double-checked the transmission redundancy was her religion. The slightest corruption of data could mean a missed target, or worse, friendly fire. Every time she hit send, she imagined the invisible line connecting her to the strike unit, a thin thread of trust stretched across distance and velocity. In that connection lived the unspoken bond between those who saw and those who acted. Ava was the eyes, Nathan was the hands. Between them, precision replaced words. The aircraft's artificial intelligence flagged the vessel's course north-northwest, 45 knots, adjusting every 30 seconds to confuse pursuit. A classic smuggler move. The AI calculated an intercept window, 14 minutes to engagement. Ava didn't need confirmation. She had already seen the pattern, read the rhythm, anticipated the shift. The enemy was clever, but predictable. Predictability was weakness, and weakness was what her system was designed to exploit. Her mind was moving faster than the plane. Years of training had rewired her perception of time. Every second stretched, every frame slowed. What others called instinct, she knew as learned response, refined repetition, until muscle memory became prophecy. She didn't react to the data. She predicted it. That was her gift. And her burden. The command console pinged a solid tone that meant everything was locked, verified, and synced. Ava inhaled quietly. Somewhere out there, Nathan's HUD was now showing the same coordinates she was staring at. The synchronization was seamless, 2 different aircraft, 2 different missions, 1 heartbeat. The system worked as designed, and for a brief moment, she felt the satisfaction of perfection, an invisible harmony between steel, code, and human intention. She updated the operations log, marking the target as active and mobile. The encryption cycled automatically, scrambling the data stream before routing it through the satellite relay. She didn't have to look out the window to know what was happening below. Her mind built the image from pure telemetry. A small hull cutting through waves, exhaust temperature spiking, human signatures flickering faintly in infrared. The system saw everything. Nothing escaped. In the upper frequencies of her headset, a new tone whispered the acknowledgement ping from Viper 2-1. Nathan had received the data. Engagement protocol was live. Ava didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply logged the confirmation and prepared for the next sequence of updates. There was no celebration, no thrill. This was procedure, and procedure was victory. Above the Caribbean, the Poseidon continued its silent orbit. Inside, Ava remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the glowing pulse of a target that would soon cease to exist. In another life, she might have wondered who they were or what they carried. But in this life, she was the link between decision and destruction, the one who made sure nothing was left to chance. And somewhere below, miles away, a helicopter had just received her message. The sky and the sea were now connected by one line of encrypted code. The operation was unfolding exactly as designed. In the split second before Nathan Cole locked his eyes onto the display, he knew this would be the moment that defined his mission. The flight path was set, The target locked. He didn't need to see the boat below. He only needed to follow the system. His helmet was the bridge between him and the world outside his eyes, his hands, and his mind, all connected to the pulse of the Viper's control systems. His movements were deliberate, precise, honed over thousands of hours of training, every instinct trained to respond faster than his thoughts. Inside the cockpit, there was no room for hesitation. His mission wasn't just about targeting a boat. It was about precision. It was about being the best at what he did. Every second counted. Every move was a mathematical equation. Angles, speed, distance, all calculated with the unforgiving accuracy of a machine. But Nathan wasn't a machine. He was the human element in this deadly equation. He was the one who would pull the trigger, who would decide in the blink of an eye whether or not the rules of engagement would be broken. The system on his helmet was unlike anything else. TSS Target Sight System. It wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of his own body. The world was projected onto the lens of his visor. Every piece of data from Ava's surveillance feed now overlaid on his field of vision. He didn't need to glance at the radar, didn't need to flip switches or scroll through menus. The information flowed directly into his mind, almost like an instinct. The moment he turned his head, the TSS responded, aligning the laser and infrared sensors to follow the target without a thought. His eyes, guided by this technology, became the weapon. Every movement was synchronized, the laser perfectly following the boat below as it moved erratically through the water. It was like hunting, only this time, the prey had no idea it was being tracked. Nathan didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. The target was almost within range 7 minutes to weapons release. He could feel the moment stretching out in front of him, as if the very air had thickened, and his every thought was now focused on the boat below. The faint trace of heat from its engines, the sound of its motors barely discernible in the roar of the Viper's turbines. The boat was running, trying to escape, trying to outrun the inevitable. But Nathan had already seen the end. He knew where it would be. He knew what would come next. The laser was on. It was invisible to the naked eye, but Nathan saw it in the heads-up display, the beam locked onto the boat's hull, its exact location now identified with the kind of precision that could only come from years of training, experience, and technology. The TSS tracked every movement, every shift in the boat's path, predicting the next turn before the smugglers even made it. It was a chase, but not one Nathan was worried about losing. In the quiet of his cockpit, the world outside felt far away. He was alone in his bubble of certainty, where nothing was left to chance. He checked the coordinates once more, a habit more than a necessity. The data was flawless. His systems were perfect. This was it, the point of no return. The moment when the technology fused with the human mind, and there was nothing left but action. Nathan adjusted his grip on the stick, every muscle in his body trained to respond with speed and accuracy. He could feel the anticipation building as the missile systems warmed up, priming for release. The countdown was ticking down 15 seconds. 10, 5. He moved his head, locking the targeting system onto the boat again. A motion so fluid, so automatic it felt like breathing. In those last few seconds, he was both the executioner and the instrument of justice, both the hunter and the weapon. This was the moment. This was why he had trained, why he had sacrificed years of his life for this exact moment in time. He wasn't just firing a missile. He was firing the culmination of everything that had come before it. Every mission, every training exercise, every failure, and every victory had led him to this singular moment of perfection. He wasn't just part of a machine, he was a part of something bigger than himself. Something that operated on a level of precision and responsibility most people couldn't comprehend. As the missile's release systems triggered, Nathan's breath held for just a fraction of a second. The missile shot forward, an extension of his will. But Nathan didn't need to watch. He didn't need to wait. The job was done. The technology had already done its work. The boat's fate sealed the moment he locked his eyes onto the target. This was his purpose. The instant Nathan's missile launched, time fractured. A perfect sequence of physics, technology, and human will collided in an explosion of pure, focused destruction. The boat below, fleeing, turning, desperate, was now nothing more than a moment in his mind. A brief calculation, a brief choice. And in the split second it took for the missile to accelerate to Mach 1, the world had already changed. The Viper's flight path had been adjusted, the targeting system locked in, but there was no room for error now. The laser guidance was already locked on the boat, securing its fate with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Nathan could feel the thrumming of the missile as it tore away. the energy building in the wake of the rocket's trail, as if it had been given a directive that would never be questioned. Nathan's pulse didn't quicken. There was no rush. He had learned long ago that hesitation was the luxury of those who were unprepared. With a smooth flick of his wrist, the controls responded effortlessly. Nathan knew the boat's trajectory before it did, its next move already calculated. Everything was a reflection of probability and certainty. His mission had already been written in the data, and the world outside was simply a confirmation of the script. As the missile sliced through the air, it was like watching a comet. It was born from the future, headed toward its target, unstoppable in its purpose. Every frame of the Viper's flight was a testament to years of refining instinct, years of pushing the boundaries of human accuracy. Nathan's job wasn't to think, it was to react, to trust the systems, and most importantly, to know that his decisions held consequences. This wasn't just another strike in the long catalog of military engagements. This was the decisive moment when everything Nathan had trained for every combat scenario, every simulation, every hour spent sharpening his senses became a reality. The missile was his answer to an equation that didn't allow mistakes. The boat, unaware of its impending fate, veered, as if trying to elude the inevitable. It was a futile attempt, born from desperation. But Nathan had already seen the end. He had already closed the gap. The missile, guided by that unerring pulse of light from his targeting system, was locked to its future. It wouldn't fail. It couldn't. As the seconds stretched, Nathan didn't watch the boat. There was no need. He trusted the system. He trusted the missile. He trusted himself. He didn't have to see the explosion to know it would happen. His hands, steady on the controls, didn't flinch. They were part of a process that had been honed for one purpose: to end the threat with maximum precision. Every click of the system was a commitment to that purpose. The missile's final stages were unfolding, and with each passing second, the certainty grew. The time to impact was closing fast. The boat had no chance to outrun the future that had already been decided. The data flowed: distance, velocity, closure rate, all lining up. It wasn't Nathan's mind calculating the math anymore. It was the machine. It was the system. It was the unbreakable bond between human skill and technology, the balance of trust in each other's strengths. In that moment, Nathan knew his role in the grand scheme was simply to ensure the machine did what it was made to do. And as the missile rocketed toward its target, Nathan exhaled quietly, the calmness of his breath in sharp contrast to the violence about to unfold. He didn't need to witness the destruction. He didn't need to see the boat vaporize in the wake of the missile's fury. The end result was already assured. The target had been neutralized before it even knew the fight had started. The missile's guidance system had already spoken its truth. Everything, every decision, every calculation had been made before Nathan even gripped the controls. All he had to do was follow the course. Trust the technology. Trust the mission. And in that moment, as the countdown to impact ticked away, Nathan knew that this was what it meant to be part of something larger than himself, something that worked in perfect synchrony, beyond time, beyond doubt, beyond question. The strike wasn't just a mission completed, it was an answer. A statement that in the world they had created, there was no escape for those who threatened its balance. The moment Nathan Cole pulled the trigger, everything snapped into focus. The sound of the missile's launch faded into the background, replaced by a deafening silence that only he could feel, a silence that stretched across time, measured in milliseconds. The system had already locked onto the target. The laser-guided trajectory was set, and now, all he had to do was let the machine do its work. The data was flawless, the calculations perfect, and yet, it was Nathan's hands, his decisions, that set it all in motion. The missile shot forward like an unstoppable force, its rocket engine roaring to life. For those few seconds, Nathan felt nothing but the power of precision. This wasn't just a missile leaving a rail. This was everything he had trained for, everything he had learned, firing at the speed of sound. He didn't need to see the target through the glass of the cockpit. He had already seen it in his mind's eye 1,000 times before, already calculated its demise. The laser had locked in. The guidance system had taken over. Now, it was simply a matter of waiting for impact. But in that moment, as the missile accelerated into the air, Nathan wasn't thinking about the success of the mission. He wasn't calculating the odds or analyzing the data streaming through his display. Instead, he was completely still, completely present. His mind was empty, save for one singular truth. He had done everything in his power to ensure this strike was clean, quick, and effective. Now, he could only trust the system he had trained to master. The boat below had no chance. It was trying to evade, performing sharp turns, desperately trying to confuse the guidance system tracking its every move. But Nathan knew this game, he knew it as well as he knew his own pulse. The missile wasn't merely following a path, it was adapting, responding to the evasive maneuvers in real time. It was an intelligent weapon, designed to outthink the smuggler's every move. And as the seconds ticked down, Nathan felt a deep, unshakable certainty that the target would never escape. In the calmness of the cockpit, as the countdown to impact continued in his head, Nathan's mind wandered not to doubt, but to the weight of what had just been set in motion. This wasn't a mission for glory or recognition. There would be no medals awarded here. This was about something far more fundamental, the protection of order, the preservation of stability. The threat had to be neutralized, and the machine in his hands was the solution. The world outside, with its chaos and unpredictability, had a way of finding its balance again. And in this moment, he was the instrument of that balance. Every mission had its risks. Every target had its own unknowns. But in the cold precision of this moment, Nathan knew he was on the right side of that equation. There was no room for mercy, no room for second guessing. The mission had been clear from the start. Eliminate the threat, protect the borders, ensure the safety of those who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't about revenge. It was about security, about putting an end to the suffering that came from unchecked crime, from the damage that could ripple across communities when such threats were left unaddressed. And now, as the missile reached its final moments of flight, Nathan remained steady. His hands never wavered, his eyes never strayed from the target. The data was flawless, the calculations perfect. The systems were working exactly as they were supposed to. This wasn't a job that demanded emotion, that required empathy. It only demanded action. The kind of action that would send a message to every smuggler, every criminal out there who thought they could outrun justice. There was no escape from the reach of the system. As the missile closed in, Nathan could almost feel the force of its strike before it even happened. He didn't need to watch the explosion. He didn't need to see the aftermath. He knew what would happen next. The boat would be erased from the surface of the ocean, and with it, another piece of the criminal network would crumble. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about the men and women behind the illicit cargo. It was about the mission, about the objective. It was about making sure that the world remained in balance, no matter the cost. The systems did their job. The missile did its job. And Nathan? He simply followed through, no hesitation, no doubt, no fear. Because when you're the one holding the reins of something so powerful, so precise, there is only one thing left to do. Trust the process, trust the machine, and trust yourself. The instant the missile was released, it was as if time folded in on itself. The world outside, with its chaos and noise, faded away. There was nothing left now but the laser-locked target and the inevitable destruction that would follow. Nathan's breath, steady and calm, matched the calculated precision of the systems around him. He wasn't thinking about the boat or the people aboard it. He was thinking about the numbers, the angles, the velocity, and the path the missile would take as it tore through the air. It was all mapped out, all predetermined. The job was as good as done. All that remained was the weight. The Viper hummed beneath him, a machine of pure intent. He knew exactly how the system would react perfectly. Every calculation that passed through the onboard computers, every micro-adjustment made by the missile, was an extension of his will, his training, his responsibility. The missile was more than a weapon. It was a continuation of everything he had prepared for, everything he had done to reach this point. There was no room for error. Inside his helmet, the target sight system, TSS, continued to track the boat below, even as it twisted and turned in a desperate attempt to evade. Nathan didn't flinch, didn't move a muscle. The boat's erratic movements were predictable. Every shift in course already accounted for by the Viper's targeting software. Nathan knew the missile was already compensating, recalculating its trajectory in real time, adapting to the boat's evasions with flawless precision. He didn't need to see the boat. He knew its fate was sealed the moment the laser locked on. The systems in his cockpit were alive, each one working in perfect unison to bring the target closer to its end. The software that guided the missile was designed to think for itself, to anticipate the boat's next move before it even made it. Nathan didn't have to think for the missile. He had already done his part. The missile was the culmination of everything, the flight, the calculations, the weapon system, all now operating at peak efficiency. It was the embodiment of years of training, years of preparation. It was the perfect extension of his focus, his discipline, his resolve. As the missile closed in, Nathan felt the familiar pull of inevitability. This wasn't the first time he had watched something like this unfold, but it was always just as final, just as undeniable. The moment the missile left the rail, it was no longer about human choice, it was about execution, about delivering the decision that had already been made. Nathan had done everything right. Now, all that remained was the missile's impact. He didn't need to see the explosion. The data he received from the system confirmed what he already knew. The missile was on target, and the boat's fate was sealed. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about anger. It was about the mission, about ensuring that this threat was neutralized. The world outside could be a chaotic, dangerous place, but in that moment, there was no chaos for Nathan. There was only clarity. The world around him was still. The hum of the Viper's engines, the thrum of the missile's rocket engine pushing through the sky, were the only sounds. The rest of the universe was nothing more than a series of numbers, locked in place, like the coordinates of a target. Every piece of data that had come in from the Poseidon, from the initial intel that had set the mission in motion, had led them here to this moment of perfect symmetry. The target would be erased. That was the only certainty, and Nathan had done his part to ensure it happened. The mission had been executed with precision, with speed, with an unshakable focus on the outcome. There would be no mistakes. There was nothing more to do now but wait for the inevitable. When the missile made impact, it would be swift. There would be no drama, no unnecessary violence, just a quick, final end. That was the way Nathan preferred it: clean, precise, and irreversible. He had trained his entire life to be part of a system that functioned in this way: fast, efficient, without hesitation. This wasn't about a quick burst of adrenaline. It was about doing the job, and doing it flawlessly. And as the missile sped toward its target, Nathan felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. There was no excitement, no relief, no pride, just peace. The world would continue to turn, but this moment, this exact moment, locked in time, was his. It was a moment of perfect execution. Nothing more, nothing less. The machine had done its job, and Nathan had done his. The impact was everything Nathan had anticipated. There was no explosion in the traditional sense. No dramatic flash of light to match the force of the missile. What followed was a moment of pure finality. The boat was gone, erased, like a shadow snuffed out in the wake of an unstoppable force. Nathan didn't need to see it. He didn't need to feel the shockwave. The data told him all he needed to know. The systems had worked flawlessly. The guidance, the targeting, the missile, it had all come together in a seamless execution of purpose. The boat had been reduced to debris, its mission undone, its threat neutralized. In the silence that followed, Nathan felt something he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge: relief. Not for himself, not for the mission, but for the world outside. For the people who would never know what had just happened, what had just been stopped before it could harm them. The system had done its job. He had done his. There was no applause, no celebration, just another job well done. Another day, another mission. The weight of the moment wasn't in the destruction itself, but in the certainty that this was what needed to happen. The world was full of threats, some visible, some hidden, but Nathan and the systems behind him were designed to find them, to eliminate them with efficiency, with precision, and most importantly, with unwavering resolve. The data came in, confirming what Nathan already knew. The vessel was destroyed. There was nothing left but the faintest traces of debris that would soon sink beneath the waves, swept away by the very ocean that had carried them. The mission was complete, and there was no need to question the result. The target had been erased, the objective achieved. But even in that moment of certainty, Nathan couldn't help but feel the quiet weight of what it meant. The system had worked. It had followed the plan, executed the strike with clinical precision. But it wasn't just a missile that had destroyed the target. It was years of training, of learning to trust the machine, to trust the systems, to trust himself. The culmination of every lesson learned, every failure endured, every success earned. This wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about what it represented: the ability to affect change in a world that often seemed beyond control. Nathan let the data flow through his systems, watching as the last pieces of the target vanished from the radar. He didn't have to look again. He didn't have to check the readouts a second time. He knew the job was done. And yet, as the moment settled into its finality, he couldn't shake the understanding that this wasn't just another successful mission, it was part of something larger. The machine had done its job, yes, But the people behind it, the ones who had honed their skills, who had made the choice to be part of something greater than themselves, had ensured that this moment would arrive. In the vast ocean, the waves would continue to roll, and the world would continue to turn. But for now, in this precise moment, the balance had been reset. The operation had been flawless, the mission accomplished with unwavering certainty. Nathan's hand never faltered, his mind never wavered. He had followed the script, and the script had led to victory. And as the helicopter banked away, beginning its return to base, Nathan allowed himself to exhale just for a moment. There was nothing more to be done, no further decisions to make. The mission was complete, the threat neutralized. There would be no more waiting, no more calculations. The target had been hit, and that was the end of it. The systems had done their job, Nathan had done his. The balance had been restored, and in the stillness that followed, that was all that mattered. The Viper's engines hummed steadily as Nathan guided it back toward the Warden. The mission was complete, the threat neutralized. The target that had once seemed like a shadow, elusive and dangerous, was now nothing more than debris sinking into the depths of the Caribbean. He had done his part, he had followed the systems, trusted the technology, and executed the strike with precision. The enemy had been removed, and the world would move on. But even in the calm after the storm, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Nathan didn't feel relief. He didn't feel the thrill of a job well done. He felt the silence that followed every mission, the silence that reminded him of the lives that were always impacted by every decision he made. For Nathan, this was the paradox of his work. The mission was always clear, always precise, but the cost was never fully visible, never truly understood. He didn't think about the smugglers, not right away. He didn't wonder who they were or what their lives had been. But in the quiet of the cockpit, as the Viper flew steadily back toward base, a thought lingered. What had they been running from? What had driven them to this life? It wasn't a question Nathan had time for on the ground, but in the air, with the hum of the engines and the weight of the mission complete, it became impossible to ignore. He knew the world was full of people driven by desperation. Desperation that led them to make decisions that could destroy not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. People didn't always choose to live in the shadows. Sometimes, they were pushed there by circumstances beyond their control. But in his line of work, there was no room for sympathy, no space for second guessing. The system was built to respond decisively, to eliminate threats without hesitation, without mercy. It was a system designed to protect, to keep the world in balance. But it was also a system that, by nature, left little room for questions. Nathan's job wasn't to ask those questions. His job was to eliminate the threats, to act as the bridge between the danger and the safety, to ensure that the balance was maintained. His job was to make sure that what had been set in motion, a strike, a decision, a mission, was completed with unwavering certainty. And as the Viper began its descent toward the Warden, Nathan felt that familiar sense of duty settle into his bones. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He didn't think of himself as a soldier. He was a part of a machine designed to respond, to act with precision. But in that moment, as he looked down at the vast ocean below, he felt the weight of his actions. He had just erased a potential threat to the world. He had protected lives, ensured stability, and maintained the order of things. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the question still remained: what happens when the system, so precise and perfect, becomes the only answer? As the helicopter touched down on the deck, Nathan took a moment before exiting the cockpit. There were no cheers, no high fives, just the quiet acknowledgement of a job completed. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, securing the aircraft, preparing it for the next mission. But for Nathan, the silence was deafening. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate the work that had been done or the success of the operation. It was just that, in the quiet aftermath, he couldn't help but feel that the very precision of his work had created a distance between the world he protected and the people he protected. The system had worked. The mission was a success. But at what cost? As he walked away from the Viper, the weight of his thoughts didn't leave him. He thought about the families, the children, the people who would never know the names of the men and women who kept them safe. They would never see the faces of the people who made the decisions that affected their lives, who fought in the shadows to ensure their safety. To them, it was just another day, just another world turning. But to Nathan, and to the men and women who wore the uniform, the cost was always present. The choices, the sacrifices, were always there. whether they were acknowledged or not. Nathan wasn't alone in feeling this weight. He knew the men and women who fought beside him felt it too. Every pilot, every technician, every analyst who worked behind the scenes to make these missions possible, they all carried the same burden. They were part of a system designed to protect, but that protection came at a price. And the price was always the same, the loss of humanity. But Nathan knew that. In a world as chaotic and unpredictable as the one they lived in, someone had to carry that weight. Someone had to stand between the chaos and the calm, between the threat and the safety. And as much as he questioned the system, as much as he felt the burden of his role, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stop. He couldn't walk away. Because to walk away was to risk everything: the safety of the people, the stability of the world, the balance that had to be maintained. So he kept walking. He kept moving, one mission after the next, knowing that each one brought with it the same question, the same weight. But knowing too that he was part of something larger, something that, despite its flaws, was necessary. A machine designed to protect, to act, to eliminate the threat, even when it meant sacrificing a piece of humanity along the way. And as he walked away from the helicopter, he didn't look back, because he knew that the job wasn't done. It would never be done. The world would continue to turn, and the threats would continue to arise. But in that moment, he knew that he had done what was necessary, and that was enough. The mission had been completed, the balance had been restored, and for now, that was all that mattered. As the world continues to turn, we often find ourselves caught between the desire for peace and the brutal reality that it must be fought for. We see the precision of a mission, the cold calculation of a strike, and the undeniable certainty of its outcome. But behind every success, every victory, is a deeper question that lingers in the heart. What is the cost? In our pursuit of balance, we must never forget that the systems we create, the tools we build, and the missions we carry out are ultimately just extensions of our
Agreed,
humanity.
but what about the
We
fluctuating
create
sensor
these
data on
systems to
level 4?
protect,
We prep for
to
resistance
safeguard
at the
the
secondary
future.
access.
But we must always remember that protection comes at a price. The true cost of security is the unspoken sacrifice of those who carry the weight of those decisions. But that doesn't mean we stop. We can't. The world needs those who are willing to make the hard decisions, those who are ready to stand between chaos and order, knowing full well the personal toll it may take. It's not about the glory or the recognition. It's about doing what's necessary, even when it's hard, even when it feels like the weight is too much to bear.
Get cover,
So,
they're breaching!
as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, what role do you play in the balance of the world around you? What sacrifices are you willing to make for the greater good? Because in the end, the mission is never truly over. It's a constant choice, a constant journey, one that requires courage, strength, and an unwavering commitment to the cause. If you found meaning in this story, if it spoke to something deep within you, then join us. Like, subscribe, and be part of the conversation. The world needs those who are ready to face the hard truths and take action. Don't turn away. Stand with us.